and then where, say, where you work.
Okay.
That way we know you're a professional and a family.
Okay. Yes. Say my name and spell it and say where I work.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
You know, just guide me through.
Yeah.
Oh, whenever I'm ready.
You're just going to talk to me.
Okay,
so
good.
Forget the cameras.
Okay.
You're just going to talk to me. So just tell me your story, but first tell me your name.
My name is Tori Collier, and I work for the Oklahoma Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services.
How long have you been there?
I have been there for 2 years.
So tell me a little bit about your story.
Yes. I have a son named Bryce, and he is 15 years old now.
Wow.
But 15 years ago, he's my first baby. And, just like most parents, you have high hopes. And, I knew he was going to be a boy early on. And, you just kind of plan your life around, will I go to work or will I go, right back immediately or not? And, just the normal kind of first-time parent thoughts you have. And then when we had him, everything during the delivery process that we had planned, because I'm kind of want to be this holistic mom, to do this natural birth and everything, and had all these plans. And so everything that I planned didn't go right. We went to Lamaze to prepare for everything, and so they put us on all kinds of drugs to get us going, because they said that we were growing so much and I was so short, and we needed to speed this on along and get him on out. And so I didn't know at that time that I didn't have to do that if I didn't want to, first baby. So I just said, oh, okay. So I came in for an induction, and they got that going, and went the whole day, and nothing happened. And so then I didn't want any drugs, really. And so they said, well, we probably need to give you an epidural, because maybe you're holding the baby in, and so this will let you relax and you won't feel anything. So that was another thing I didn't want, but I thought, oh, okay, I'll do that too. And then so when it was time to push and all of that, couldn't feel anything. And then they said, well, nothing's happening. You've been at this a long time. We just need to go give you a C-section. And he seems like he's distressed now, so we need to go ahead and get him on out. So I was like, okay. So we did that. He didn't breathe right away when they took him out. And so we were Milton was kind of yelling, my husband is Milton, was kind of yelling, breathe, Bryce, because he was moving, but he wasn't breathing. And so, they rubbed him and got him going, and eventually he, took breaths and cried and whatnot. So we thought we're great. I was exhausted and tired. We were growing really well. He was a very hyper kid. He cried a lot, unless he was with me. Thought that was normal. They said, oh, that's colic or whatever. And some kids cry a lot, so we didn't have any alarms there. But he always didn't sleep well and was kind of fussy unless he was with me. As he grew, 1-2 years old, we started. First of all, the positives are that he spoke early. He walked at 9 months, so he started running right at 9 months. Saying words, he knew all of his alphabet, he knew all his numbers, he knew all his colors. So when I would take him to the library with other kids who were just kind of drooling and kind of toddling and falling and crawling around, he would see the librarian who'd give story time, and he'd be like, Bubbles! And running to her and trying to talk to her and all that. So he started off at a fast development pace. And then when we got up to be about 2.5, he kind of started responding like he couldn't hear us. So he'd be standing right in front of the TV watching cartoons, and we'd say, Bryce, sit down, get away from the TV. And he wouldn't move. I mean, it literally was like, he thought he couldn't hear her. And of course, Milton would think, oh, well, he's just not listening. So, grab him, sit down, and so we kind of thought, well, he's just being a, defiant little 2-year-old or whatever. But I kind of knew. I mean, when you discipline him, he'd look at you like, why are you doing this to me? What's going on? I mean, he really looked like he didn't understand why you're yelling and why you're upset. And so I kind of thought maybe he was losing his hearing and he couldn't hear, is what I thought. So went through all that, took him to the pediatrician, get him tested for his hearing, took him to OU Children's with an audiologist even just for a second opinion, just to make sure. At that time, we were receiving, I had asked about the Oklahoma Health Department also does that kind of thing where they'll do screenings for you. So we went all that route, right? And so they said that his hearing, as far as they could tell, was fine. And so then I started going back to the pediatrician. Okay, well, he's hyper, fussy, but he just kind of went down his checklist and said he's developing fine. He knows all things on my checklist developmentally, he's fine. So, Mom, don't worry about it. You're just worrying about nothing. But I kind of started, I knew something isn't right. Because, like, he should be able to sit still. I mean, he'd get to where you'd open any door and he'd run out of it. He'd run in people's homes. If we were in a grocery store, he'd run off. When it was like, Bryce. And at that time, by the time Bryce was about 2, I was pregnant with my second child, Bailey. So I'm big, pregnant, trying to run after this very hyperactive child. So about 2.5 to 3, I took him to the health department, and they thought, well, he may have some delays because he's not responding. He can hear, but he's not responding. We can't tell you what it is, but he does qualify for services, and we can just call it a delay. Pediatrician had already told me he thought he was fine. Once I got a program called Sooner Start involved, as we came in at 2.5, and so by the time he turned 3, they basically said, well, sorry, I know you just got here, but he's aging out of our program. So we have to turn you over to Norman Public Schools, and you'll have more services there. They'll be able to do more stuff. They'll be able to talk more about diagnoses, because really in this realm, at that time, 12 years ago, they may do stuff now, but then they just kind of only handled, just called it delay, and they kind of bring a speech therapist to the home to kind of watch him and work with him, or a developmental specialist. So anyway, so aged out of that pretty quickly, got introduced to Norman Public Schools. They introduced him into a pre-K program that was for children with developmental delay, and at that time, we got introduced to a school psychologist who thought that Bryce had autism. So at that time, that's kind of the first time we had heard that. We were like, whoa, autism. We knew about Rain Man. We'd seen that movie. I'd seen another movie in college where a kid didn't speak and it just had all these kind of savant-like special abilities. And I just thought, okay, he's hyper, we've got words, he's acting like he can't hear, but let's not go, let's get a second opinion now. We're not, So, we weren't ready for that one. So we started inquiring about other people who do diagnoses of that type. And so we got introduced to the Child Study Center here. There was another organization called Positive Strategies that we got a diagnosis from. So the Child Study Center did a long, extensive diagnosis where they put him in a room, put blocks in front of him, ask him a lot of questions. And so they determined that they thought that he did have autism. So we're like, okay. So then we went to the Positive Strategies folks, and they said, well, we're not ready to say he has autism, but he has a thing called PDD-NOS. So it's under the autism umbrella, but he could probably grow out of it. It's a bright kid. I wouldn't worry. I think he'll be fine. So, you get that kind of hope. But then, so what I did, we went ahead and put him into the Norman Public School preschool program, developmental delay. Teachers there were just very capable. I was very nervous. I really wanted to put him into, I had all this, I'm a planner by nature, so I had everything planned out about where he would go, the best little preschools in Norman. And so at first I kind of ignored it. I thought, okay, well, I might come to you, Norman Public Schools, but I think at the time it was a private preschool in Norman, and I went to them and I told them what I'd been told, but that I wanted Bryce to go here. And they were like, oh, I'm so sorry, we're not equipped to deal with any of that type of disability and things like that. This would not be the place for your son Bryce. So I was like, oh, so it was kind of the first time where I was kind of getting that pushback. And I even tried another daycare that my other two children went to fine. And I had a great relationship with the director there, and I even told her, and I said, hey, would like my kid to come here, but this is, all full disclosure, this is kind of what I've been told. And she was like, oh, Tori, we can't. And so I was like, he's a kid, he's 3 years old, to me, they all are running around, and so I didn't really have a choice of where he went then. So now the only thing I have left is the Normal Public Schools. He's going to get this label of being disabled. And so the whole idea of having to deal with that, my husband didn't deal with it well at all because, he was more silent about it, but he was just very depressed and disappointed about the whole thing because this is not what you have. This is not what you think. You never would think that you would have to deal with something like that. And they're telling you that it's probably, besides this one Positive Strategies folks, everyone else is saying this is going to be something lifelong you're going to deal with. I stopped going to my pediatrician because then I started researching everything I could find about, what is this disability? What is autism? What can we do? And once I found out there are people that will try to cure a child with autism, especially this young, I was like, okay, let's get this fixed, And so there was no one in Norman or in Oklahoma City, even at Children's, that had that philosophy. They were all, you just give them therapy. I'm so sorry. Speech therapy, occupational therapy, that's all really you can do. There's some folks that do some diets that have been helpful, but really, I'm so sorry. And it's kind of like, what? And so once I did my research, I found a doctor in Dallas he actually had a son on the spectrum, and he treated him with all kinds of vitamin supplements and in addition to the therapies, but diet and drug supplementation. And they went like all out. As much as you'd want to pay for, you could go from just spending $100 to $500 maybe on these different vitamins, stool sampler kits, starting to get I forgot what it was called, but it's some type of diagnostic scientist that will actually take samples of blood, urine, stool, and test it and see how many toxins are in it. And that stuff is expensive, though, and you have to pay for it all out of pocket. None of this stuff was covered by insurance. So we started traveling to Dallas, and we did all the vitamins. At this particular time, I was in grad school, and so I kind of had flexibility where, we put everybody in the car and we drive and try to do the vitamin regimens. It was 12, 15 different vitamin supplements that we had to order through special websites. He had a few through his office that you'd order. And the more we went, the more invasive offerings he would offer. He said, there's also these B12 shots that you can order. So in addition to putting him on a regimen of 3 times a day, giving him all of these pills that you could crush up and mash up, put in drinks, he'd gag and throw up, that you try to give him. They'd also want us to do enemas of this type of vitamin, and in addition to the shots. And then they said that there's also a thing called chelation, where you do an IV to try to clean the system out. And this is, you're talking about now with 3, 4, 5-year-old kid. My husband basically, we got to a point where he was just like, I'm not doing it. This is, you're having to hold down a kid to give him stuff, enemas, all ends, and he was just, and I, of course, I was like, you've got to do this together. You can't leave the team. This is the way we're gonna fix or cure him. They said we couldn't eat bread anymore in the house. Everything needed to be cleaned out. He could only eat rice type based products. Had to be all gluten free, dairy free, casein free. Everybody had to do it or it wouldn't work. And my husband just like, I'm eating pizza. It's like his kids can't. So we went through this. You're talking a few years, and he was just like, Tori, this is getting crazy. And we were just, look at our medicines everywhere. Kids screaming. Now he won't even drink orange juice because he thinks you're going to put crap in it. And sorry, I didn't mean to say crap. No, but he said, this is. And now looking back, I understand, but at the time it's very stressful. You just feel like, you're not doing what we need to do to fix this, So it's just, it's a lot of stress on the marriage, a lot of stress just overall in the home. By then I have another baby, toddler coming along. I'm just trying to do the best I can. I added, in addition to the developmental disabilities program, I added him going to a typically developing preschool. I found a preschool on the OU campus that was open to taking children with disabilities in addition to regular ed kids, to expose them to both. And so I would take him there. I'd go do some classes in grad school. I'd pick him up and take him to the other preschool where they keep him. So anyway, in addition to doing that and the traveling, and then what Wilson said he didn't want to do it, and it was costing us a whole lot of money. I mean, I don't know, thousands of dollars. And I also was a part of support groups with other parents that were doing this. And it was getting toward the end of my graduate program, and I was going to have to go back to work. And I found it hard trying to manage doing the things that I could do at home, and just keeping all of this up, and then not having really the money to continue to support it. And it got to be where the support group ended up being more stressful than it should have been, where instead of feeling like a support, when everyone's doing something to the highest level, and in your home you've decided that I don't think we're going to be able to continue to do it in this way, then it starts making you feel like a bad parent when you go and hear what they're doing that you're not doing.
Right.
So the support groups, the autism support groups, in addition to my life and Bryce and marriage, started to be a stress. And so I kind of stopped going to those. But during this journey, so we dialed down the interventions of biometric intervention with the drugs and the vitamins and things, and started focusing more on the therapies of the speech therapies and the occupational therapies. And so we were working with a developmental disabilities center called J.D. McCarthy, in Norman. And so we started taking him to those therapies there. And so I don't know if you wanna.
Well, no, that's great.
okay.
Nolan's here, and I'm wondering if we could bring him in.
Yeah.
And talk about. You could have some water if if that would help.
Yes.
Hey. We started without you.
Great.
Because part of the reason is because I want them to look a little bit different. We haven't done that before.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Did that ramble on? Did it make any sense what I was saying?
It did. I had no idea.